sometimes you come to the conclusion that the world as you know it is the only world that is out there. And that is never the case. There is the regular life that we all lead. And with regular life, we have a specific place that we typically live. With our regular life, we have a typical routine that we pursue. With our regular life, we have a job, or we have studies, or we have education, or we have interaction, or we have pursuits that we go after because these are things that are important to us. And however we make the calculation, however we make the equation, however we come to a place where it is important for us to do what we regularly do, we have come to a conclusion that this is how we should live. And as we do this, we are comfortable in what we do. Now, this doesn't mean that everything is exactly as we've always wanted it to be, but it does end up meaning that there's a certain level where we understand the parameters. We understand what the upside of the life is that we have. We understand what the downside of the life is that we have. We understand how we interact with other people, and we understand the relationships that we have, sometimes frustrating and sometimes very gratifying. Recently, I was able to go far away to go to the wedding of one of my sons. And as I went to the wedding of one of my sons, I was introduced to a new world. I was introduced to a world that is far older in terms of architecture and in terms of buildings and in terms of culture than the world that I regularly live in. I was introduced to a world where the primary heart language of the society is an entirely different heart language than the one that I know. I primarily use an automobile, but there the primary transportation for many is to use trains, subways, light rail, buses, trolleys, and a variety of other public transportation. It was a world where, though I'm very competent at doing my world here, I was a beginner where they are. And as we come into things, sometimes we are very resistant to becoming beginners. Sometimes we're very resistant to being a people who are doing things we don't know how to do. Sometimes it can be frightening for us to be in a position where we don't know what happens next. And so I'm getting on public transportation in a land where I don't speak the language. I am seeking various stops on public transportation to get to different places. And I don't necessarily know where I'm going. I don't necessarily properly spell the stops that are there. I have often heard the stops said verbally to me where someone says, get off at this particular place, and what ends up happening is I get on and none of the things that I'm looking at look like they're the written expectation of how that word sounded verbally. For what I got out of the time that I was overseas, it was well worth becoming a beginner all over again. For what I was able to participate in the joy that surrounded the event, it was well worth becoming like a child once again in order to find my way around. And in the midst of what I was doing, I ended up having help both from family, from friends, and from other people. But there were things that were going on there that were beyond what I understand. And I look at this because sometimes people go, I will not step out of my area of comfort. Sometimes people go, I don't think that I can do something that I've never done before. Sometimes people go, oh, that would be too hard or too expensive, or I'm not sure that I want to do this. I understand all of the reasoning. I understand why people feel the way that they feel. I understand why things have turned around and why, in many cases, we don't want to do difficult or hard things. But when we talk about spirituality, when we talk about seeking God, when we talk about the things where we present to people that it is worth it to pursue God, sometimes it's the start of a new adventure. Abraham, when he was an old man, God said, get up, leave your family, leave your kin, leave the culture and the society that you have known, and go to a land that I will show you. As an older man, Abraham took Sarah, took his flocks, took his herds, took his servants, took the people who were attached to him and said, we have to go to a place that a God that I have not seen is going to show me because this land is going to be important. And I'm sure that there's people who asked Abraham, are you certain that this is going to pay off for us? And honestly, the promise that God gave Abraham was that the payoff would be in the era and the time of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and in the time of many people who were not yet born and whom he had not yet even conceived of existing. So this is what happens with Abraham. God puts Abraham, or actually offers Abraham, a spiritual journey that is going to pay off in the generations to come. And Abraham is willing to sacrifice in the short term so that great things can happen in the future. And so often we insulate ourselves and keep ourselves from doing things that might be hard in the short term, but may end up paying off in the future. And I just really felt like as I was in a different place, with a different language, with different parameters, learning how to operate there, that this was an opportunity for me to understand what it was to be a beginner all over again. And I am reminded that many people who have the courage to pursue God spiritually are doing the same thing all the time, even if it isn't entirely in a different country and in a different language. Shalom.